Welcome to another tutorial. This is Abubakar. Today I'll be introducing you to the Java API for SaaS authentication. For this interaction, we'll first need to set up the environment, which will consist of Eclipse for the IDE and Tomcat for the server that will be running our web service. So I've downloaded both packages and placed it in my download folder and installed it. For the installation guidance, I will refer you to their websites. But once it's installed, this is what the IDE will look like. So as you can see, I have servers. Those are the Apache servers that I've already configured with my service, which you will also need to do. As you can see down here, that's the Apache server, but it's currently stopped. It's not running. Once we deploy our application, it will start running and it will run our web service that we can have an application invoke. To configure it, you have to go to View and then go to Server. And then once you have the server, you will have to add a new server. So you basically right click on the server, if I can get it to work, yep, and go to servers, and then find your Apache that's installed, and then configure it to use it. In this case, I'm using Apache 9. For more configuration, you can click here to pick the server or add it to the pool. Alright, so we'll continue. Now that we have our server, so let's get back to our environment. Okay, so now we need to create a dynamic web page. Dynamic actually application, which will basically help us create a web server. So we'll go to new, and then we'll select dynamic web project. And now we need to provide a name for the project. So in this case, I will just type Thales web service, so Thales WS, and I'm picking Apache 9, and then you can see, and then we just click finish. So that will give us a little structure that we'll basically use for our development. So next we need to go to the source and then find our class. Actually, we'll create a new class here, and that class will change the package name. This is just for me, but I'll just call it thales.com .web.service, and then the package name, the class name in this case, not the package name, but the class name, I'll call it Thales API. Okay, now that's done. Nothing else to do. We just click finish. So this gives us our structure to create our program. And so in here you can see I have a package name, and then I have my class. So next we need to import the library because it's missing. So we're gonna go back to our installation directory where we put the Java API, and then we'll browse to the Java API directory, to Java API, and then bin, then x64 library. Then we'll copy these libraries because these are required for the program to function properly. Now we're gonna put that in our web service folder that we just created. So we're gonna go into the Eclipse work directory, and we'll find our program, then go web content, web INF, library, then we'll paste this. But the program will not directly see this. We'll have to reload the program for the program to see it, and then we'll have to link those libraries. And the way you do that, you basically go back to the top of your project, and then you right click and then you go to a web service. If I can find it, where actually not web service, yes, there you go. So we'll now link our libraries. Okay, go back to the same folder and then select all three of them and then click OK, and then apply and close. So this will bring the library into our application. So now we can create an instance of the CryptoCard library that we can use for the program to perform authentications. The first thing we need to do is to import the library. So that will be CryptoCard API dot CryptoCard API. So we have the library imported. This is very important because this is all the built-in function we'll use to perform authentication, because it's all part of the CryptoCard library. Now we're going to try to create the static libraries, the static variables for the authentication responses. Am I putting this in the right place? I believe that's the wrong place. It should be inside the class. Let me make sure of this. There, I think that's it. Okay, good. So now we're gonna continue. So I'm gonna go ahead and create the other authentication responses. We're gonna hard code these so that we can use it to perform the various check once we perform an authentication. These are gonna be the response codes. So we're gonna match the response code to the static variable, and then based on the response we will perform the necessary code. We'll basically create the necessary code to perform that use case. So here's pin provided equals 3, and then static user underscore pin that change equals 4. Pin is probably out of window underscore auth equals 5. Static and static int pin underscore change underscore failed equals 8. Okay, missing int here. Okay, so I think this should be more than enough to perform a demonstration of authentication codes. So now we're going to create a method to perform the authentication. If I can learn how to type here. There you go. So we're going to call this function authenticate, and it's going to take two parameters. User, so it's a string username, and then another string passcode. So we're going to go ahead and code that. Okay, and next what we want is to get the well, we'll have to, since we're doing a string, we have to return something, otherwise the program will throw an error. What am I missing here? Okay, go. And so now we need to create the path for the INI file. Actually, before we do that, let's do the authentication data. So I'm going to create the array that's going to hold all the authentication data. And that's going to be an array of strings of size 11 for all the return codes. Okay, and now I'm going to perform some initialization of the array so that we don't run into any issue. I'm going to just initialize all the elements to a null, or rather I should say an empty string. So that's 0, then we're gonna do, that's 1, and the next one is gonna be 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so we have the array that's initialized, and now we can start, building some code to handle authentication. And this code by any means is perfect. It's just for demonstration. There's a lot of things that can be done differently when writing professional code. This is just to show you the functionalities. Now we're going to create the INI path, where we'll basically have the authentication configuration, and that's basically pointing to my current agent installation directory. But you could definitely change the path and put it anywhere you want to. I'm just taking advantage of the current environment. Okay, so we're gonna identify the crypto wrapper within the INI. Okay, crypto wrapper win that INI, and then put a semicolon. Okay, so now that we have a path, we need to set the library to that path. So we need to set the INI path. and then we need to also load the library. So we'll call our we have to instantiate the library so that we have access to the methods that are part of the library, which include authenticate, set INI path, and then load the library. So I'm gonna call this one crypto API, and then we're gonna get an instance. So now that we have an instance, then we can set the path. So we just call crypto API. What am I doing? No, crypto API. Go back. Okay, crypto API. So we're gonna set the path, and these are all built-in functions. So if you do it right, it should pop up. And now that we have that INI path set, now we need to work on loading the library. And so we're just gonna do the same thing, except that next time we're gonna pick to load the library from a location. And then we'll provide the INI path. But remember, this function could or cannot find the library, so we need to put a try catch around it so that if any issue, then we'll throw an exception. Okay, so next we'll need to perform some basic assignment. We need to get the username and password, and then we'll assign that to the array 0 and 2 respectively, and then we can then perform an authentication after that. So real quick, we'll check to make sure that the username is not empty. Right, so username equals not null. If it's not null, actually this should if not null, let's see, what am I doing? Yes, if not null, then I want to load the library. I want to assign the username. So of data, then I'm going to specify the element 0 for the username, and then that will be equal to the username. Next, I'm going to check to make sure the password isn't empty either. So passcode not equals to null. And I'm going to assign the password. Equals password. Got an error. What am I doing wrong? Let's see here. Oh, yeah, it's an element. So I'm supposed to be assigned that to element 2. Okay, so now we are going to perform an assignment. We're basically gonna now test the different use cases, but we also will need to perform an authentication at this point. So let's go ahead and okay. So now let's take a look at the next step, which is to create okay. So now I'm gonna double check the array of data just to make sure that the element 8 is not equals to 1, because if it is, then that means the server is down, unreachable. So I'm going to make sure that's not the case, and if it is, then I'm going to return a message to let the user know that the authentication service is down and that they probably should contact their administrator for further assistance. This is a very basic response. I mean, the response could be more complicated than that, but for demo purpose, we're just gonna keep it simple. And here we are going to basically check for authentication element 7 and to make sure that element 7 is, if it's equals to 1, which is success in this case, because we are parsing an int, and so since we hard-coded success of success equals 1 to at the beginning of our program, so now we can just use it to validate the user and make sure the response, and make sure authentication is either successful or failed. But here in this case, if it's a success, then we know authentication passed, then we're just going to return authentication OK. And so we're going to do the same thing for the remaining of the use cases. I'll probably code some of it, not all of it, but you get the gist, you get the idea of what, how to handle different authentication responses as far as SaaS is concerned. So let me go ahead and code the rest of these. Okay, almost done. Okay, so let's see. All of these, so we can probably do this one too, just so that you can see. And there you go. Let's change that, and we'll return the same thing. We'll just return out of window. fix this. That's O, capital O. Okay. So let's fix up the code a little bit so it's a little more structured. Again, this is no means a professional code. It could definitely work, but there are a lot more checks that needs to be done. And like as you can see, I'm just returning an empty string there. I should be returning something meaningful. Also, you could probably try to implement the rest of this code below in order to, do some practice. But for the bulk of it, I think we have our authentication service. Let's see what else is missing. Just make sure. Check authentication. Yeah, authentication. You know what? Since the built-in function is called authenticate, so we're gonna change this to authenticate service. Just so that there's less confusion. And we need to make sure we actually call that function because we haven't called it yet. Right? So I need to go ahead and apply that. So here, okay, so let's just call the crypto card. And then we'll pass it the auth data. Now that we have everything in place, we can finally now start testing our application. So now we're gonna create the actual web service because now we have everything. So we're gonna go ahead and create all the little different services that are required in order to run this. And at the same time, we're gonna create the client as well to help us consume the actual web service. So we just make sure we're picking the right stuff here. So it's gonna be bottom up, and then we need to enable the client so that that can also be published. And remember, this is when you needed your web service, your Tomcat service for. So now it's going to deploy it to Tomcat. Okay, so now we have our WDSL service that we can now invoke and use for authentication. As you can see, I'm entering the wrong username and password, and the response is going to be authentication failed. And now we're going to enter a correct username and password and test, and authentication is okay. So yes, so this almost concludes what we wanted to do. Now with SOAP UI, you can do the exact same thing. First of all, let me remove this old test that I was doing. And now we're gonna go ahead and add our new WSDL service. Okay, so I need to browse back to, gotta get back to Windows Administrator. Yep, right there, go, Eclipse. And then we need to go to Thales Web Service, right there. And WSDL service. And now we can now invoke this service and test this out. And so let's do this. And now we have username that we can pass the parameters Ubuntu, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and test. This should also fail, but the response should be authentication failed. And now I can go ahead and enter the correct username and credential. And send. Authentication is a success. Okay. Well, thank you for joining this call. And I hope you learned something from it. And there will be more in the series. Thank you. Bye.